Hi Mark, welcome to my marketing consulting project, and today we'll be deep diving the Fibre Business Intelligence team brand. In terms of the focus of our discussion today, the framework used to discuss the marketing consulting project will be as follows. I will first provide the context and define the problem statement. Then we will review the research approach. And sections 4 and 5, which is the most focus of today's discussion, we will review the data collected, the data analysis, summarize the findings, and finally go into recommendations and a 30, 60, 90-day action plan. So let's get started. So let me start with giving context about this team. I am the manager of the Fibre Business Intelligence team since the inception, which was 2014. We are part of Project Falcon. Project Falcon is focused on bringing fiber to your home and businesses. Earlier this year, with recent organizational changes, Project Falcon is now called Broadband Networks, and we went from being Falcon BI to Fibre BI, and also got moved under a new director, and a vice president still has to be announced. My team has been more on the reactive reporting side, data analytics 1.0, reporting key operational and financial KPI metrics to understand the performance outcomes resulting from the fiber investment. My team is strategically transforming from reactive reporting engine to data analytics 2.0, providing insights to help guide and course correct when necessary. Given the shift in our strategy and the organizational changes with a new leadership team, this is actually a perfect timing to deep dive my team's brand and understand how the brand is being perceived internally by the Fibre team members and externally by our stakeholders. I started to allude to the problem statement in the previous slide, but I think it's really important to have clearly state the problem statement as we go forward into the analysis. So today our focus will be to examine the opinions of the Fibre Business Intelligence team members and its stakeholders to diagnose our brand equity and discover opportunities to make it stronger. Why is this diagnosis important and meaningful? Our team's success is linked to having a strong team brand. It increases stakeholder trust and recognition and the value the Fibre Business Intelligence team can provide through data analytics. It also provides team members with direction and motivation, which are key contributors to ensure a high level of team members' engagement. The sponsor of this analysis is me, but I'm looking to share the findings with my new director team and my new leadership team, and looking for the team's the support in order to implement few of the recommendations. The research approach used for this marketing consulting project is collecting based on primary data. To understand how the Fibre team members perceive and understand our team brand, I conducted 30-minute interviews with all of my team members, which was a total of 9 interviews. And then to understand the external perception, I interviewed 5 of our key stakeholders and also conducted 30-minute interviews. In terms of the questions asked during the interviews, they were all centered on the brand equity framework, which we will review in the next few slides. Evaluating the problem statement will be anchored at utilizing the brand equity framework, which was keyed to the data collected and analyzed. There are 4 key dimensions to this framework. Number 1, dare to be different. Strong brands carve out a distinct personality in the way they present themselves. The key is to find innovating ways to reach out and please your stakeholders. Number 2, internalize the brand. Team members who are part of a team organization with a strong brand believe in the brand because they understand the purpose, goals, which leads to motivation and are engaged at work every day. Number 3, create the emotional connection. Stakeholders prefer to work with teams in which they have emotional connection with or a strong relationship with. These teams have created a strong brand which embodies trust that is hard to imitate. Determine your own fame. The final feature of this framework highlights that strong brands don't just have a distinct personality, but also account for something. They create meaning and value for their stakeholders. When you have all these dimensions in place for your brand, you have brand equity, which means simply you have a strong brand meaning and awareness. As I said earlier, we'll assess the Fibre BI team's brand strength by utilizing the brand equity framework for the data collected in the interviews. But before we look at the data inputs received by the interview process, I would like to first provide some context of how the interviews were actually conducted. For each of the folks that were interviewed, I did send out a pre-read 1 week before the interview time about the information about the brand equity model and the 4 dimensions. I also included the interview questions that I'll be asking relating to each of the dimensions of the brand equity model. And lastly, I did ask for each individual to come prepared with the responses. My objective when we meet face to face was to have a conversation about the perceptions of the Fibre's BI team's brand rather than talking about the context of the interview and explaining the brand equity model in detail. I also created 2 questions that would help measure the strength of each dimension of the brand equity model. So on this slide, we'll first focus on the following 2 dimensions: dare to be different and internalize the brand. But before we look at the responses, let's also review the scoring scale. For each question, all of the respondents need to score each question from 0 to 2. And I kept the scoring results separate from the Fibre BI team members versus our key stakeholders so we can understand the internal versus external perception of our team's brand. So for each response from the Fibre BI team members, we'll add up to 9 because 9 interviews were conducted. And for the stakeholder section, the roles will add up to 5 because 5 interviews were conducted for each stakeholder and they had to score from 0 to 2. Okay, let's start with the data collected for the Dare to Be Different dimension. We'll start with the input from the Fibre BI team members first. It's good to see that majority of the Fibre team members feel that some of the time they do see an opportunity to drive innovation that focuses effort on being different. However, from a stakeholder's perspective, we're seen on the lower side of Dare to Be Different, as for both the questions, 2 of the 5 responses our stakeholders have rated as 0, saying that our team is not providing solutions that are innovating. So definitely we have an opportunity to improve on that front. So what's really interesting here for me is that even though the Fibre BI team members believe that they have some opportunity to provide some innovation, it doesn't seem like that effort is translating to be Dare to Be Different from a stakeholder's perspective. In terms of the responses collected for internalizing the brand, from the Fibre BI team members' perspective, 4 of the 9 team members do not always have a clear understanding of our team's vision. But even though our team's goals may not always be clear, it's good to see that 78%, or 2 of the 9, feel engaged on a day-to-day basis. We have similar results from our stakeholders' perspective. We have 3 out of 5 of our stakeholders that don't always have a clear understanding of our team's vision, which can be translated to a lower understanding of what our brand means. Strong communication strategy helps to increase knowledge and understanding of our brand. I didn't ask the last question on stakeholder engagement as it was not applicable in assessing our internal team's brand. Okay, now let's look at the next dimension, which is creating the emotional connection. The 2 questions that were asked were focused on building trust and having strong relationships with our stakeholders. Has the Fibre BI team done a good job in establishing trust with our stakeholders? Has the Fibre BI team built strong relationships with our stakeholders? It was great to see that 7 of the 9 Falcon BI team members rated they have a strong trust relationship with our stakeholders all the time. Obviously, that takes time to build. From our stakeholders' perspective, you see similar results with high scores from our stakeholders having trust with our team all the time. So what this translates is that our team's brand has created trust, which is resulting in our stakeholders having strong emotional connection with our brand. Our final and last dimension of the brand equity model, we're going to deep dive the determine your own fame. The 2 questions that were asked are as follows. Does the Fibre BI team offer valuable insights that drive positive outcomes? And number 2, do stakeholders value the services offered by the Fibre BI team? From the Fibre BI team, there's mixed responses to these two questions. As a manager of this business intelligence team, I would like to always ensure that we're driving value for our stakeholders. So I am concerned that the answers split are evenly between the two questions, where half of the team feel that they're always creating value, and on the other side, the other half feel that that's only sometimes. Now I see that that is an impact when team members don't feel that they're creating value, because that can be passed on to our stakeholders. But what I found interesting is that of the 4 of the 5 stakeholders, they scored 2 for both questions, saying that for all the time we are creating value and providing unique valuable services, so we are determining our own fame. So let's get into the last part of our presentation, which is the conclusion. But before we go right into recommendations, let me first summarize the key findings and insights shared by the participants from both the Fibre BI team and our key stakeholders. So we'll start with Dare to Be Different. So from the Falcon BI team members' perspective, a lot of the feedback that I got was that we're so focused on immediate deliverables. We have limited time bandwidth to drive innovative solutions to our stakeholders. And if you actually recall, most of the team members rated the answer to this question for Dare to Be Different as number 1, meaning only sometime we have time to innovate. So I translate that as that's a nice to have, but it's not a critical part of our team's mandate. And if we look at it from our stakeholders' perspective, they don't see a lot of innovation from our team. So are we actually exhibiting Dare to Be Different? The feedback that I got was that we have a limited self-serve capability and when we're trying to access data. If we move along to internalizing the brand, 44%, or 4 of the 9 Fibre BI team members, don't always understand the overall strategy in terms of goals and vision. And if a Fibre BI team member doesn't understand our strategy, I think you'll see similar results from our stakeholders. And if you actually recall, 3 of the 5 stakeholders only sometimes understand our strategy. And honestly, I think our strategy should be understood all the time within our Fibre BI team and within our stakeholders. In terms of creating an emotional impact, the Fibre BI team members like the opportunity to collaborate with different stakeholders. The ability to drive meaningful, relevant data to stakeholders is important. In terms of the additional feedback shared by our stakeholders, which was actually very insightful for me, stakeholders understand the complexity in data accuracy and appreciate our team's efforts to improve data quality. And there's an appreciation of collaboration when sometimes the ask is not always clear. If we now focus on determining your own fame, this is very interesting in terms of what we've learned from the interview process. So we are definitely driving positive results for our stakeholders, and we do add value and drive meaningful business outcomes. But like I said in the previous slides, only half of our team members feel that they're adding value in terms of the work that they perform. So when I deep dive this a bit further by asking additional questions during the interview process, what I learned was that the Fibre BI team members are not always sure that their insights and analysis drive positive outcomes. It seems that they have limited feedback from their stakeholders once their particular task is completed. As part of the recommendation process, after the interview, I asked the Fibre BI team members to provide suggestions on how they can improve our team's brand across the 4 dimensions of the brand equity model. So improvements related to Dare to Be Different are colored in purple, and most of the suggestions are related to having courage to innovate and discovering opportunities to improve processes. In terms of internalizing the brand, the feedback from one team member is to continue to improve, learn, and grow. Feedback for creating emotional connection is colored in blue, and the focus is all related to increasing our collaboration with our stakeholders. Lastly, the feedback in yellow is related to determining your own fame, and where a team member does suggest that we need to add value right from the beginning of a business problem or a challenge rather than being brought in only in certain parts or on an ad hoc basis. This will enable the Fibre BI team to become more proactive by learning where we need to build alert capabilities, which I thought was great and very unique from a traditional BI team. Okay, so let's get into the final recommendations of how to strengthen the Fibre BI team's brand. And we're going to start off with Dare to be Different. If we are to become stronger mavericks, we need to allocate time on a weekly basis in order to create new opportunities to please our stakeholders and look for innovative ways for stakeholders to access our data. And it's going to be important to create and pilot innovative solutions that allows us to improve our processes. And this should be included as our required mandatory objectives in our team's PPO's focus so we can focus on it. In terms of internalizing the brand, the stronger interlock is required with the Fibre BI team at the manager level and at the director level in communicating the team's strategy, priorities, and goals. I also think it's important to schedule a quarterly roadshow with our stakeholders so that we can communicate and share the Fibre BI's team's key priorities and long-term strategic vision. Creating emotional connections. We need to keep focus on building collaborative relationships with stakeholders. Not only is this a win for our customers, but it will also help to increase the team's level of engagement. Building trust and strong relationship takes time with stakeholders, and so we need to always put a continuous effort in order to maintain and support. And lastly, determine your own fame. Encourage team members to become more proactive in asking feedback for stakeholders, and encourage team members to drive value realization from end to end so we can provide data insights and capabilities that our stakeholders truly value. In terms of our recommendations, what I've done here is build an action plan for the next 90 days. So for the upcoming month, June, for the next 30 days, what I'm going to do is I'm going to review the marketing consulting project with the Fibre BI team now that it's complete. I've got a team meeting scheduled for June 14th. I also will review the analysis here with my director and my VP once somebody is announced. And I think what I also want to do is formally allocate 20% time for innovation and brainstorming in our upcoming June sprint. And then I will encourage a few team members to join and brainstorm how we can further determine your own fame initiatives. And in July, I think it's going to be super important that we organize a town hall so that we can share our key priorities and our strategic vision with our Fibre BI team. And I think that message needs to come from either the director or the vice president. And in terms of the messaging, we need to have a communication deck that summarizes what our priorities and visions are, and that not only can be shared with our internal Fibre BI team members, but with our key stakeholders. And once we start to learn more from the innovation and brainstorming sessions, I actually want to formalize an objective in our PPO structure. And in terms of August, I wanted to do a deeper dive on any initiatives that can help us determine our own fame. And if there is something that's super cool, let's try to pilot it. And what's super important as well is to make sure that we have a training plan to ensure team members have the right skills to drive value realization from end to end through BI capabilities. That includes our presentation, so thank you, and as Mark would say, ding dong.